When I was about 12 years old, I had the only bedroom in the house that was not on the second floor. My parents owned a high ranch-style house, so when you walked in, the layout split into two directions. A short set of stairs led upstairs, and another short set led down. The lower level had a den, the garage, my bedroom, and a bathroom. All three of the other bedrooms were upstairs. Since I was the oldest and the only boy with two younger sisters, I was given the downstairs room because it was the largest and, in a way, the best one. After I turned 10, my parents gave my twin bed to my younger sister and upgraded me to a full-size bed. It made sense since my room had enough space for something bigger. At 12 years old, my sisters were about 5 and 8. I was allowed to stay home alone at that age, but my youngest sister was never left alone with me. My 8-year-old sister could stay if my parents were only gone for a short time. If they were going to be out longer, one of my parents would take both of them along. For a few nights in a row, maybe 3 or a little more, I kept waking up in the middle of the night without any clear reason. Each time, I struggled to fall back asleep. At that age, I felt like I should not have been dealing with sleep issues. I usually had a fan running next to my bed because it was a very hot stretch of summer, and the steady noise should have kept me asleep. I could not figure out what was waking me up. One night, I got out of bed after waking up to refill my glass of water. I walked into the bathroom right outside my room, and while filling the glass, I thought I heard something from inside my bedroom. I turned off the faucet and stood still, listening, but everything went quiet except for the hum of the fan. I stepped back to my bedroom doorway. I could not see anything unusual, but there was something about the room that suddenly felt wrong. It made me uneasy. I decided to go upstairs and sleep on a living room couch instead. I eventually fell asleep, but later that same night, I woke up again, this time to sounds coming from the kitchen. I noticed the faint light from the refrigerator shining into the living room and heard someone moving things around inside it. From where I was on the couch, I could not see into the kitchen because of how the space was laid out. After a moment, I heard the fridge door close. Then there were footsteps walking away, heading downstairs. I was still half asleep and did not fully process it, so I drifted back to sleep. The next day, my mom was in my room folding laundry when she mentioned that it smelled bad and told me I needed to clean whatever was causing it. I brushed it off because I did not notice any smell at all. Looking back, I regret ignoring her. That night, my dad turned on the air conditioning because the heat had become unbearable. After we all sat together and watched a movie, everyone went to bed. I went to my room and played video games for a while until I got tired. Then I shut everything off and lay on my side like I usually did. Since the air conditioning was running, I did not have the fan on, so the only sound in the room was the air coming through the vents above. I fell asleep, but once again, I woke up shortly after. I was not sure what had woken me. At first, all I could hear was the air moving through the vent. Then it stopped, and the room became completely quiet. That was when I heard it. Breathing. It was not my own breathing. I stayed still and looked around the room. The closet door was closed, so the sound was not coming from there. Part of me, still thinking like a kid, wondered if it was my younger sister trying to scare me. I got out of bed and crouched down to check the one place that came to mind. Under the bed. I lifted the hanging edge of the bed cover, and there was a large person lying underneath on a pile of blankets. Their head was facing me, and their eyes were shut. I instantly fell backward and scrambled out of the room, shouting for my dad. I remember hearing my parents' door fly open and both of them calling out, alarmed. I pointed toward my room while backing away, and my dad rushed in. He pulled out a large man who looked dirty and unkempt. I can still remember how easily my dad forced him out of the house while my mom called 911. I do not know what happened to that man afterward. Maybe he was arrested, or maybe not since he seemed homeless. Either way, the experience had a lasting effect on me. I was too scared to sleep in my own room after that, or even feel comfortable in the house. For a while, I slept between my parents at night. My dad later installed security cameras throughout the house. We threw away anything that had been opened in the refrigerator because we had no idea what he had touched or eaten. The fear of someone hiding under my bed stayed with me for years. We never found out how long he had been there. It could have been days. The strange smell, the sounds from the fridge, and the nights I kept waking up all suddenly made sense. Whether he planned to harm anyone or not, the idea that someone had been hiding under my bed is something that still feels like a nightmare no child should ever have to experience. This story comes from my great-grandfather, who has reached the remarkable age of 101. He has shared it at family gatherings for many years. He was born in the city of Yaroslavl in Russia. Back then it was still the Soviet Union when he was born. Like many men of his generation, he served in the Soviet military during World War II. A few years after the war, he eventually made his way to the United States to escape life under communism. Recently, he told me this story again. It took place not long after something he called the Battle of Iliki Iliki. It was not one of the major battles of the war, but it still involved heavy fighting and a great deal of bloodshed on both the Soviet and German sides, just like most battles during that time. It was evening, and according to him, the cold was unbearable, the kind that cuts through everything. They had taken shelter in a small house or building that had somehow avoided damage, which made it valuable because it held some warmth. He and his fellow soldiers were celebrating. There was drinking, singing, laughter, and joking, exactly what you would expect from men who had just survived a long and brutal fight. At some point during the night, 2 other soldiers entered the building. My great-grandfather and his friend Sergei did not like these men. He said they were loud, obnoxious, and generally unpleasant to be around. After a while, Sergei asked him if he wanted to step outside for a smoke. He agreed, and the 2 of them put on their heavy coats and stepped out into the freezing air. My great-grandfather took out his cigarette, and Sergei did the same. He lit both of them, and they stood there talking for a while, enjoying the moment and the feeling of victory after a battle that had lasted nearly 2 months. Once he finished his cigarette, they were about to head back inside when they heard something that stopped them. From somewhere in the distant woods, they heard what sounded like a man screaming. Thinking it might be one of their comrades, possibly under attack by a group of German soldiers, they rushed back inside and grabbed their weapons. Not taking any chances, they gathered several other soldiers and headed into the woods together. As they moved deeper into the forest, my great-grandfather said he began to feel uneasy. It was a strange sense of dread that he could not explain. After a while, the screaming stopped. Since they no longer had a clear direction to follow, my great-grandfather suggested splitting into pairs to search the area. Sergei stayed with him, while the others went off in different directions. After a couple of minutes walking through the dark and frozen forest, he said they began to hear faint crying. It sounded like someone in pain. Sergei heard it too, so they moved toward the sound. Soon they noticed drops of blood scattered across the snow, which made them realize the situation might be far more dangerous than they had thought. When they finally reached the source of the crying, what they found was something neither of them could have expected. There were 2 German soldiers on the ground. One was clearly dead, while the other was still alive. Their uniforms were torn apart and soaked in blood. The one who was alive was pressed against a tree, shaking and mumbling in German. At first, he did not notice them. My great-grandfather stepped toward the body lying nearby. He said the corpse was mutilated in a way he had never seen before. Limbs were missing, the face had been torn apart, the uniform was shredded, and it looked as if the man had been scalped. What disturbed him even more was the smell. He said it was not like the usual smell of death. Instead, it was something strange, almost like chemicals. The body looked fresh. While he examined the corpse, Sergei approached the surviving soldier. When the German finally noticed him, he recoiled in terror, as if completely broken by what he had experienced. He began shouting in German. That was when my great-grandfather noticed the extent of his injuries. One of his legs was badly torn, and his chest was covered in blood. He remembered the man repeatedly saying something that sounded like Das Chaos, or something close to it. Without hesitation, Sergei drew his pistol and shot him once in the head, ending his suffering. Almost immediately after the gunshot, my great-grandfather said they heard a low, unnatural moaning sound. Then, in the darkness ahead of them, something tall moved quickly, running away into the trees. Startled and afraid, both he and Sergei began firing their weapons wildly in the direction of whatever it was. The rest of the soldiers rushed over after hearing the shots, but by the time they arrived, whatever it had been, there was gone. When they returned to the village, they were reprimanded for their actions. A report was sent up the chain of command, but nothing ever came on it. No investigation followed. My great-grandfather always said that it was the most terrifying experience of his entire life. Even now, remembering the sight of that mutilated soldier and whatever it was that fled into the darkness still unsettles him deeply. This incident happened when my fiancée Morgan and I had just moved into our home together in a quiet little town, the same house we still live in today. It is a small but charming place, just right for the two of us, and maybe a couple of kids someday if we choose to have them. Not long after moving in, we met one of our neighbors. They seemed friendly enough, an older couple in their late 60s. The neighbors on the other side were much farther away, so we did not meet them right away. At the time, we were still busy unpacking and getting everything set up. It was probably our second week living there. Every night we were completely drained, balancing work during the day, and then coming home to continue organizing and furnishing the house. That evening, Morgan was in the kitchen cooking pasta, while I sat at the table talking to her, browsing for rugs on my laptop. The house felt a bit warm and stuffy, so I decided to go open the sliding back door. As I walked over, I glanced into the backyard and froze. There was someone sitting in one of the patio chairs. He was hunched forward with his head lowered. I am not exaggerating when I say it scared me badly. I quietly said Morgan's name and told her not to scream, explaining there was a man outside in the yard. She came over, looked, and gasped. She grabbed onto me, half hiding behind me, and said I should say something, then immediately second-guessed it. Honestly, I did not know what to do either. I am not a big guy, and even though he was seated with his back turned, he looked larger than me. Morgan suggested knocking on the glass and telling him to leave. I hesitated because I was genuinely afraid. The backyard is quite large, but right outside the door, there is a patio area with leftover furniture. The yard lights were off, so we could only see him because of the light coming from inside the house through the glass door. That meant he was fully aware we were inside. I finally worked up the nerve, knocked on the glass, and shouted that he needed to get off our property. The man slowly turned to face me, then stood up with a strange half-smile, almost as if he found the situation amusing. He looked to be around 50 years old, with a long gray beard and tattoos covering his arms down to his wrists. He walked right up to the glass door. I double-checked that it was locked. He stood there and shifted his attention toward Morgan. Then he began licking his lips and saying disgusting, inappropriate things. I told him I was calling the police and shut the sliding blinds so he did not have to look at him. I dialed 911 and asked the operator to send officers as quickly as possible. Even through the door, I could still hear him, now speaking loudly, almost shouting, continuing to say vile things about Morgan. I even held the phone near the glass so the operator could hear him. The operator kept me on the line until police arrived. Eventually, everything outside went quiet. I carefully peeked through the glass and saw that he was gone. Still, we waited for the police. When they arrived, they searched the yard, took a report, and then left. We thought that was the end of it. But later that night, while we were sitting in the living room watching TV, we both heard something outside again. I went to the window and slightly pulled the blind aside. The same man was back. He was holding a cigarette, facing the house, either talking to himself or trying to talk to us. He must have noticed the movement of the blinds, because he suddenly rushed toward the window. I jumped back as he started pounding on the glass, shouting more horrible things about what he wanted to do to Morgan. I told her to go upstairs, so she would not have to hear it anymore. I yelled that I was calling the police again. The pounding stopped, and everything went silent. After a few seconds, I looked again, and he had disappeared. I went upstairs to comfort Morgan, who was clearly shaken. I told her he was gone, though looking back, I should have called the police again right away. Then I heard noises downstairs. I walked halfway down the stairs and heard banging at the back door. The doorknob was rattling and turning. He was trying to get inside. I rushed to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and called 911 again, begging them to send help immediately. This time, the police arrived much faster. I did not alert the man that they were coming, but by the time they got there, he had disappeared once again. It seemed likely he had run off into the wooded area behind the yard. He did not return again that night. The next day, we went around the neighborhood, introducing ourselves to people we had not yet met and asking if anyone recognized the description of the man. What we learned was deeply unsettling. A couple living a few houses down knew exactly who he was. They said he had a history of abusing his ex-wife, along with issues involving alcohol and drugs. He was known to be dangerous. The worst part was that he lived just around the block in a small, run-down house. We reported everything to the police, but since we did not have any video evidence, there was nothing more they could do. We have not seen or heard from him in a long time. I can only hope it stays that way.